For those that don't know what Ascribe was or Ocean Protocol, can you just tell us a little bit about what those two things are?
Ascribe, in today's terms, would be called an NFT platform. Back then, the word NFT wasn't invented yet. So the motivation was to get creators compensated, to get artists paid, as well as for collectors to collect art with better securities. It was a platform like a web app, as well as a REST API, as well as a protocol on top of Bitcoin to enable all those things. Ocean kind of has a similar goal, whereas Ascribe was about leveling the playing field for artists and galleries and about ensuring trust and integrity and helping creators get paid. It's similar in the world of data, but in this case, it's around data for use by data scientists, especially with AI, where AI is the means of creating value from the data. To summarize, Ascribe levels the playing field and unlocks value for digital art creators. Ocean levels the playing field and unlocks value for data scientists.
Show's finally here. I finally got Trent on the podcast and we get to learn all about Ascribe. If everybody that's a big historical NFT fan knows, Ascribe is the first NFT platform, at least that I've come across, and it was built on Bitcoin. And there's a lot of history that was kind of lost within the or once that Ascribe was shut down in 2018, although Trent did put out a very thoughtful article with all of the details. Now we have him here, so we get to answer a bunch of the questions. Truly an honor to be with a pioneer who has also now moved on to Ocean Protocol, and as we were discussing before this, he thinks is just as pivotal as Ascribe was back in the day. So Trent, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. For those that don't know, maybe what Ascribe was or Ocean Protocol, can you just tell us a little bit about what those two things are, and then just a little bit about you yourself?
Sure. Ascribe, in today's terms, would be called an NFT platform. Back then, the word NFT wasn't invented yet. So it was, the motivation was to get creators compensated, to get artists paid, as well as for collectors to collect art with better security. So, it was a platform like a web app, as well as a REST API, as well as a protocol on top of Bitcoin to enable all those things. Ocean, it kind of has a similar goal, whereas Ascribe was about leveling the playing field for artists and galleries and about ensuring trust and integrity and helping creators get paid. It's similar in the world of data, but in this case, it's around data for use by data scientists, especially with AI, where AI is the means of creating value from the data. So you can view, to summarize, Ascribe levels the playing field and unlocks value for digital art creators. Ocean levels the playing field and unlocks value for data and scientists. That's kind of the way to summarize it all.
Oh man, that we're gonna get into Ocean Protocol at the end. There's a lot of questions that I have about that, especially with kind of this like surge in AI and kind of has taken the spotlight away from crypto. I got into crypto in 2016 and felt like ever since I got into it, crypto was always the kind of like golden child of technology, but also the Wild Wild West as well. And now it seems like that's kind of like AI. When I was doing my research through Ascribe, through your blog that you had put out and the things that I could find on the internet, it seemed like around 2014 and 2013, the kind of idea was trying to figure out how to authenticate assets and put them on the blockchain. I want to try to go back to that time and then get into your mind and then maybe a little bit of the team that you had around you. What helped you kind of like hypothesize that was a massive issue and that the blockchain could solve this?
Yeah. So I guess, to also answer the rest of your previous question, my background is I'm trained as an electrical engineer and computer scientist, and I've been programming my whole life. So I'm a big nerd, basically. And I get excited by, weird new technologies, that, especially ones that show real promise. And so I've been working professionally on AI since the late 90s. The two startups and a PhD. The startups were around using AI for chip design, semiconductors, and the PhD as well. And also I played with other AI applications and stuff too, of course. And we're technically playing on such a brain or synthetic biology or whatever. And most of these technologies, they're sort of like AI. The ideas go back to the 40s and 50s. But crypto and blockchain, while there was cryptography, blockchain kind of emerged from nowhere, right? People had been theorizing it a bit, but it really wasn't even that mainstream among the nerds among us. So when Bitcoin came out, it was kind of like this giant bomb that got dropped, and excited nerds throughout the world, including myself. So that was part of the discussion was me and my nerd friends talking about it going back to 2010, hanging out over drinks or coffee or whatever. And I'd even bought some Bitcoin in 2011. Not a lot though. Always people, woulda, coulda, shoulda. So anyway, though, so that was part of it all. And in 2013, my wife and I had relocated with her family to Berlin. And in Berlin, Germany, this was where the world's first bricks and mortar place to accept Bitcoin for anything existed, a place called Room 77. And not only did they accept Bitcoin for something, they accepted Bitcoin for beer. So they would have meetups every 2 weeks or every month, I forget, where it would be all these Bitcoin nerds hanging out talking about Bitcoin, but also talking about blockchain. And that was something that really hadn't heavily been on my radar before that. So, those conversations started in 2013. There's a second thread here, which is the art side. My mother was an art teacher. So I've always loved art. I was drawing all the time as a kid, even considered a career doing art, although I just realized that I liked even more than art. I liked building and creating. So that's why I ended up as an engineer. So I married a woman, Masha, my wife, who is an art professional. She is trained as an art curator at the École du Louvre. She had actually worked at the Louvre as an assistant curator. She has a degree in art history, a PhD in it. And interestingly, her PhD subject is the relationship between art and commerce. So she had thought a lot about it, and her and I had had a lot of conversations about that. So, and that was going back to the mid 2000s and more. So there was two threads going on, right? Sort of the tech nerd thread, following Bitcoin closely, but with the background in AI and other sort of deep tech stuff, and then the art thread, including working at top museums, as well as Masha had been running a gallery in Vancouver, et cetera. And she had come across this problem of how do you collect digital art? And it was actually a fairly well-recognized problem by 2013. Magazines would talk about it here and there. I reference a couple in the blog post on NFTs on Ascribe for NFT archaeologists. And as a sort of a specific example to illustrate, this one collector had bought a DVD. Mm-hmm. This one collector had bought a DVD of an artwork from the gallery that Masha was representing in Vancouver. Yeah, this is the blog post here. So, and they came to Masha, I don't know, a year later, 2 years later, and said, hey, I scratched my DVD and I can no longer read the work. Can you give us a new DVD? So Masha, as helping to run this gallery, she went to the artist and said, hey, what do you think? Do you have other sort of copies of this? And the artist said, well, no. The artwork is the artifact. And so the collector was like, okay, well, I guess I got this piece, but now it's essentially been bricked. It's dead. You can't see the image. Although, of course, there's still this sort of historical significance. It's sort of like a painting with a slash through it. So it's there, but not there. But this kind of points to, a bit of the confusion around what should be the thing of value with art? Should it be the artifact, the physical artifact? And until then, that's how it actually had been. If you go to art shows, sometimes you'll see, quite often you'll see the artwork coming with the TV. Back in the day, it was with cathode ray tubes. These days, it's much more digital and flat and stuff. Even NFT exhibitions are typically like that, where you can get the TV with it. It comes with it. But back, in this case with the collector, they thought, oh, great, I'll just get another copy of this because it's about sort of the intellectual property on top, this this idea that it's the idea itself manifested on a medium, but if the medium breaks, you can get a new medium. But that's not how the artist saw it. So, and really, ultimately, it's sort of up to the artist in a sense, especially if there's no sort of contract legitimizing this. So basically, there was this big problem, right? If you want to collect digital art, the only way is if you get this physical artifact. And but we live in this era of the internet, right? The web came out in 1989. It's been 30 years. So can't you collect things of value? So so this problem was emerging all the time, and as the internet got more popular and social media and all this, then it was becoming a bigger and bigger problem in the art world. How do you reconcile this? And there had been computer art going back to the 70s, right? And we referenced several of those artists in the paper, and I've had the good fortune of meeting many of them over the years. But this problem was still happening. And by the late 2000s, artists were searching for, how do you have scarcity online? So, you can have scarcity in domain names. So there are some artists doing that where, they would sell the domain name. And, when they first started doing it, then domain names, they would sell the artwork for like $100, but those same pieces are now worth $10,000 or more. Anyway, that was the problem. How do you collect digital art? This is a problem, and this really matters because for the artist, it's about getting paid. If you're a digital artist, should you, have suddenly like a 100x lower valuation for your art simply because people don't know how to collect it? And if you're a collector, you want to make sure that you truly are the owner, compared to this collector that had this DVD where they kind of got messed up. How do you collect it? That was sort of the problem we were trying to attack. And we had, we talked about this stuff all the time. And then we had just seen an exhibition in Berlin in spring of 2013. And we were talking about this. The conversation often shifts to, tech and Bitcoin and crypto, but also it often shifted to art-related problems. And this problem popped up. And then we kind of had the idea together, just asked the question, what if you could collect digital art the way you could collect Bitcoin? What if you can own digital art the way that you own Bitcoin? And that was the thread that we pulled on. And that's where Ascribe emerged. And to this day, that's sort of the mental model that makes sense, right? The heart of it is, you own it if you have the private key. And the provenance of ownership is all on chain, starting from the person who initially registers that work, the artist typically, to the chain of ownership from the next person, the next person, the next person. So that's sort of, the heart of the idea, the inception of it, and the basic mental model of how to solve it. Basically, your key, your artwork, not your key, not your artwork.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And so I am scrolling through the piece that you put out that's called the Ascribe for NFT Archaeologists, where you mentioned down in 2.4, the Ascribe launch, you began theorizing in 2013. It was publicly shipped in late 2014. I recently also put out, through my research, I did a piece that was just kind of this primitive NFT marketplace roadmap where it's just covering all the history of the history of NFT marketplaces. And this is actually where I became so fascinated with Ascribe of, you see kind of in 2014, I put protocols because it was around this idea of authentication. How do you authenticate it? Some people went through Counterparty. There was One Name, there was Monograph. Both of those were on Namecoin. And then Ascribe was on Bitcoin. And then we see in 2015, a ton of platforms building on top of Ascribe. But if we're looking in 2014 during this theorizing and beginning the proof of concept, did you look at any other blockchain at the time to potentially build this on top of, like with Kevin McCoy and Monograph, or with Munib that did the same thing with One Name on Namecoin or Dogecoin? Did you look at any other blockchain?
Right. So remember, we started to work on this in spring, summer of 2013, right? This was before Monograph. This was before Munib, any of that, right? The One Name idea was already out there from Aaron Swartz, who had published a blog post with this after conversations with Zuko. But there was Counterparty already out there. And there was also the colored coin concepts being explored. So there was some conversation around this. I referenced some of them in the article. So when we conceived of Ascribe, the first thing we did was, I came from an industry that had tons of litigation, all this. So I was very used to writing patents as a way to sort of protect ourselves against, bad people taking the ideas. So it was pretty straightforward for me to write a patent application for this. So that's exactly what I did. And That was published in, I believe, August of 2013. Around that same time, I contracted out a person to help build this, Yanislav Mihalov, who went on to build Eternity, and him and I hang out and keep in touch ever since. And so, and he had transactions going. The first transaction that I'm aware of was in November of 2013. And I referenced that in the blog post as well. And that was, we had connected him with Jonathan Monahan, who is an artist we collaborated with throughout the Ascribe days, including from, the initial idea, getting his feedback. So he, that particular transaction was pointing to, with the prototype protocol of Ascribe on Jonathan's piece. So that was from, I think, November of 2013. So Ascribe isn't just a platform; it's also, this backend REST API service and a protocol, and it's a Bitcoin overlay protocol. So, of all the networks, of 2013, there was one that was by far the strongest, which is still the strongest, and that's Bitcoin, right? Mm-hmm. Bitcoin back then, the transactions were super cheap. It was, 1 cent per transaction, maybe even less. So it was pretty obvious that, we would use Bitcoin and overlay on top of it. For us, it wasn't even a question. It gave us what we needed as well. It was, the claiming of the copyright, the registration process, where you have the hash of the artwork, et cetera. So there was, in the spool overlay protocol for Bitcoin, it has features for that. Basically, what does the protocol look like for registering work? And then as well as what does the protocol look like for transferring a work from person 1 to person 2, person 2 to person 3, right? And then also it has relations what this means from an intellectual property standpoint. So this is all 2013. And by end of 2013, November, December, there was a first prototype. And then in 2014, we started on the second prototype, in January of 2014, and iterated with artists throughout that year. So I believe Kevin McCoy's stuff came out with Monograph, all that. That was like about mid 2014. So we were, we had been iterating with many artists by that time, quietly in this basically private beta. And then by fall of 2014 was when we officially announced Ascribe. So that kind of gives you a feel of the timeline. There was, lots of great work that was done before, from, the discussions on colored coins, from, Bitcoin itself, all of the previous ideas too, like Ted Nelson, who sort of conceptualized the World Wide Web and his Xanadu project. All of the stuff, there's a wonderful intellectual history here that we saw ourselves building on, and that's sort of, the things that we'd built. And then, Ascribe, like I said, the patent in August of 2013, patent application, first transactions in November of 2013, and then building out the beta throughout 2014.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. So when I was looking through and doing research, I actually went through your blog to find a lot of the history, and that's how I was finding some of these different stories that were of the different protocols that were kind of built on top of Ascribe. The first one that I believe in 2015 was one called Cointemporary that launched in March of 2015. I actually found this video of you guys all doing or them doing a transaction of Cointemporary. Just for from your perspective, or do you know if this was the first marketplace that was built on top of Ascribe, and what was it like seeing other builders build as, I guess we would call it an L3 if you guys were an L2, kind of like on top of Ascribe? Yeah.
So first of all, Cointemporary, this is Valentin Rury, who is in that video on the far right, the guy with the beard. They had actually been out for a while already, where they were selling physical artwork, but using Bitcoin to buy and sell. So as the means of exchange of the money side. And then, but they always had envisioned and hoped for some means of selling digital work. And so when we came out, we got in touch, and they were the first, as far as I know, the first sort of official marketplace for buying and selling digital work in this online fashion. Of course, Ascribe, people were like, our go-to-market was working closely with artists who typically already had gallery representation. So the artists were buying and selling their work through galleries as well, right? We had actually built in support for buying and selling Ascribe works into Ascribe itself. We had actually integrated Stripe, but we didn't push that merge because we saw that this would be in competition with the galleries, and we didn't want to be in competition with the galleries. We saw them as collaborators and partners. So Contemporary, they view themselves as an online gallery / marketplace. And this video here, this was basically two things. Contemporary had been already, that might have been the first work on Contemporary. There might have been some stuff before, I forget. But this was certainly the first time, in this case, it was collaboration with MAK Vienna, which is like a 100-plus-year-old museum out of Vienna. And this was the first museum that had bought a piece through Ascribe. Therefore, you can say the first museum that bought an NFT. And it was a work by Harm van den Dorpel, another artist that we collaborated with a lot, has a lot of excellent pieces through Ascribe. So it was, and it was using the Contemporary last mile marketplace. So, Ascribe as, the L1 was Bitcoin. You can view Ascribe as sort of a light, like it's a protocol on top of Bitcoin, but I wouldn't call it an L2. It's more like a lightweight smart contract, right? Because it's using the Bitcoin protocol as, but sort of this light, this protocol, the small protocol on top. And then I wouldn't view Contemporary as an L3. It's just simply an application on top of the Ascribe protocol using the Ascribe REST API as well. So there's Ascribe for the protocol and the REST API. There's Contemporary for the last mile, the web app, etc. It's work by Harm van den Dorpel, and the collector in this case was MAK Vienna. And we're pretty proud of that moment, right? Because as far as I know, it was the first time that a museum bought an NFT.
Absolutely beautiful moment. I was absolutely astounded when I found it. There's so many small crevices. The most unique product, or I guess on top of Ascribe or using Ascribe, is this one that's called Neuro that you were involved with, which had to do with recording brainwaves through a wireless headset called Emotive Insight. And then you were turning them into essentially what is an NFT in some sort of hackathon. I couldn't find too much information outside of like a few web pages using the Wayback Machine. Can you take us through like what was the thought of this and how cool and innovative of an experiment was this at the time?
Yeah, I think it's even kind of cool and weird to this day. So I like weird stuff, right? I'm a nerd, and I've always had a fascination with the neuroscience and all that. When I was living in Vancouver, I was even helping to co-organize talks around neuroscience, working with some neuroscientists out of the university there. So long-time fascination with neuro. I'd actually bought and hacked on a few brain-computer interfaces headsets in the past, going back to the 90s. So, long-time fascination. In Ascribe, I believe this was maybe the web post has it sometime in maybe late 2015, was it? Mm-hmm. We had this hackathon in Ascribe, and it was a pretty cool hackathon all in all. We're very happy with it. It was over a weekend, and a very intense weekend in Berlin. And 20, 30, 40 people showed up, and there was at least 10 teams that built something really cool in the end. And all of the things that were built were like, I'm really, really happy for the stuff. So in this case with Neuro, Greg McMullen and I had this idea, hey, let's make a marketplace for brainwaves. Greg had been working with Ascribe at the time full time. He actually came up with a lot of the really awesome legal side. He's actually trained as a lawyer. So Ascribe actually legals are really well founded with intellectual property law, reconciling with the internet, drawing on great work done by Second Life in the past and more. So we said, okay, let's just put together a really cool demonstrator to buy and sell brainwaves. And then we're like, okay, how do we get the brainwaves? And Greg had just got himself an Emotive headset, which was at the time one of the consumer grade headsets for scanning brainwaves. In this case, it's an EEG scanner, so it senses the electrical signals on your forehead. And in general, EEG is sensing electrical signals on your scalp, right? So and it had a web app as well that you could get images showing you like graphs showing you the brainwaves. So that's what we did. We would put on the headset and then think something. So Greg had a few different random thoughts, thinking of chocolate or whatever. Myself too, and then some friends and colleagues who were at the hackathon, like Kieran O'Leary, who was basically our first institutional investor in Ascribe. So we created got a lot of these files, we saved them as images, and then each of them we simply registered as a work, as an NFT, if you will, on Ascribe. And then we set up a marketplace for this. And already by that time, there was Shopify, which is sort of like Amazon in a box, right? You can go to shopify.com and set up your own marketplace in a matter of minutes or hours. So back then, it took us an hour or two. We set up a very basic marketplace for brainwave images. And you could buy and sell with that, with US dollars, credit card, whatever Shopify supported. And then if that purchase went through, we would get an email saying, okay, time to fulfill this purchase. And then we would simply transfer the ownership to that person who had made the order. So, and, we, on that, we put for sale several of these EEG brainwave images. So yeah, it was a demonstrator, but it was end to end and live and working, right? People could use it to buy images, and some people did. I'm the proud owner of a few of those images that I either created myself or bought from others. Yeah, so that's what Neuro.com was. And it's Hacker Neuro, right? N3uro.com. So it's just a domain name that I had kicking around for years, and I put it to good use.
Absolutely. That's what we do with when we're innovative in this space. And then as I'm moving on into this timeline, this is when kind of Ethereum starts popping up with some of their primitive stuff with like Ether ID, and then Spells of Genesis on Counterparty. One final one we'll touch on for Ascribe until we kind of move into the scaling and stuff was Left Gallery, which ended up ceasing operations within the last year or so. But it seems like that was probably the most successful that was using Ascribe before they migrated to Ethereum after Ascribe had shut down. At the time, from 2014 to 2018, how pivotal was Left Gallery to Ascribe? It seemed like that's kind of where the culture was cultivated from some of the past forums that I read through with Harm and some of the blog posts and things like that. What were your thoughts of Left Gallery?
Well, first of all, on the culture of Ascribe, Ascribe culture drew a lot on the traditions of sort of Web 1 culture, right? The Internet Archives of the world, the Creative Commons of the world, writings by Larry Lessig, and open source, Eric Raymond, all these sorts of folks, right? So that's really sort of the culture we really sort of cultivated and wanted to run with. And Bitcoin culture was emerging, and back then Bitcoin culture was much healthier on average than it is now on average. So the people in Bitcoin and in blockchain, this in 2013, 2015, this was like a really exciting group of people. The conversations were always amazing, and sort of that's the culture that Ascribe had, basically. But Ascribe's twist there was, of course, also deep engagement with artists. So we had the great opportunity to work with a lot of excellent artists, and my co-founder and wife, Masha, she was the one really driving this, coming from her art background. So working with Harm van den Dorpel, who is the founder of Left Gallery and created that, as well as many other great artists, right? I'd mentioned Jonathan Monahan. We worked a lot with Constant Dollart, with Jonas Lund, and many others, right? And these artists, back then digital art was still not a big thing, right? It was hard to get paid with it, so most of these artists often, or a lot of them, had to have side gigs just to pay for themselves, to feed themselves while they're doing their digital art. I'm really happy that it's taken off now, so it's easier for them to get paid directly with their art now. We, as the post lays out, we had a lot of collaborators, and everything from like TV stations like Icono TV to several different marketplaces, Cointemporary and Left Gallery among them. So Left Gallery, Harm was one of our lead collaborators over many years, and to this day I count him as a friend. So when he launched Left Gallery, we certainly promoted it a lot, and it was one of the several anchors that Ascribe had for sort of last mile marketplaces, right? It wasn't just Left Gallery. I wouldn't say that Ascribe was hinged on Left, but Left was certainly a good chunk of sort of Ascribe culture, side by side with Cointemporary and Icono and some of these other ones as well as all the artists around that. And it's overall, as Ascribe was winding down in 2018, we worked with several artists, and Harm migrated all of his works and the Left stuff to Ethereum. And by that time, CryptoKitties had come out, and the team that did CryptoKitties had created the ERC 721 protocol, which we thought was great, right? It meant that there was a place for people to migrate to. Harm migrated there, and there was already a couple early NFT marketplaces that had come out, such as actually I forget off the top of my head, but there was a couple back then, and we were in touch with those teams as well a bit. So we were pretty happy that there was soft landings that these artists could go to, and these works could get migrated to. Yeah, I guess that's a bit of the history there.
Yep. Maybe you may be thinking of either OpenSea, Super Rare. There was Rare Bits, Known Origin, Rare Art, Digital Objects. There was a few of those for the Ethereum, I think, around that time.
Actually, you're right. It was Super Rare and Known Origin. OpenSea came a bit later, a year or two later. So it was those, and then the CryptoKitties team. Like I said, they created ERC 721, and they went on to do the Flow blockchain and the NBA Top Shot stuff, all of that, right?
Yep.
So
yeah, absolutely. So I know you began developing or at least theorizing on Ocean Protocol around 2015 or so, and then there was the transition out of Ascribe in 2018, as you mentioned. Had you been thinking about that transition of kind of what the next wave was for blockchain technology? It sounds like you were kind of at ease to shut down Ascribe at the time. And when you did shut down Ascribe before transitioning full-time to Ocean, we know now that the data was lost. Was there any conversation about that, about trying to preserve those I think it was about 35,000 assets from what I read at the time because they're lost on a centralized server?
Yeah, so overall, that transition was, we transitioned from Ascribe to BigChainDB to Ocean Protocol. And there's sort of two aspects to this, the sort of like what do you build and then how do you get funded to build it. And so in Ascribe, we had seen that Ascribe was gonna be challenging to get Ascribe funded going into 2016, mid 2016, all of that. We had really good numbers from a Web3 perspective, but Web3 was not a big thing yet at all. So VCs were still funding from a Web2 with numbers from a Web2 perspective, and our numbers from a Web2 perspective weren't amazing, right? So it was, while we'd had a seed and a seed top up, we hadn't had a Series A yet, and it was actually very hard to get funded as a Series A. And me and Bruce, our other co-founder, were hitting the road a lot, talking to potential investors, and it was tough going. So, but at the same time, in 2015 era, there was a lot of talk of enterprise blockchains, as well as in Ascribe. We were starting to hit some scaling issues. Transaction fees for a single Bitcoin transaction had gone up to 10 cents. And we'd seen this was a showstopper for some cases, right? We've been iterating with IAM. It's a Berlin-based photo app / photo marketplace. And they're going through 100,000 images a day, right? So if we wanted to register each image separately on Bitcoin, that would be 100,000 times 10 cents or 10K a day just to register. Now, of course, we could roll these up in some ways, and there's even ideas back then on how to do that. But that kind of hurts the provenance a lot. So we were asking ourselves, okay, like how do you scale this? And that's actually what led to the idea of BigChainDB, which was take some really scalable centralized database technology and decentralize it somehow. So we took MongoDB and decentralized it with the Tendermint protocol. That's what the tech evolved towards. Initially, it was slightly different, but that's what it looked like in the end. And that was the idea of BigChainDB. And Ascribe was meant as the first use case. But because there was so much interest in BigChainDB, we went through something like 50 POCs in the span of a couple of years. As a startup, you have to focus, so we decided to focus on BigChainDB. But within 2-3 years, we saw that kind of the technology choices, et cetera. It was really hard to get it permissionless decentralized. It was more like federated. You can have 10 or 20 entities, but it was really hard to get it where anyone could be a validator rather than just 10 or 20 validators. And so we were, as well as it was clear that kind of the idea of enterprise blockchain was maybe not quite the place where we wanted to be spending time, and enterprises were happy to do POCs, but they were very reluctant to go to production, as is still the case today. So we said, okay, let's go back to our roots of Ascribe in the sense of decentralized permissionless and leveling the playing field and all that. also, coming from the AI world, I had started to realize there was big challenges in the world of AI, and all roads led to decentralized data markets as sort of the thing that could unlock it all, to level the playing field around data and AI. So we were starting to think about that more. And so when we transitioned from, so we were looking at transitioning from BigChainDB to Ocean. And this was already in mid 2017, basically, was when we were starting to transition already, to ramp up effort on Ocean. And then by early 2018, we had sort of 3 projects running, right? We had the Ascribe stuff being served, we had BigChainDB still going, and then we had the new Ocean stuff. And that's a lot for a startup, right? So for Focus, we said, okay, how do we wind down the Ascribe stuff? And we knew that the protocol, the spool protocol, the Ascribe protocol, it was still on Bitcoin. And so, and that's basically all the transactions, et cetera. And anyone having that software could then go and transfer ownership from one person to the next, to the next, to the next. And make claims and stuff, revive the protocol however they want, but it's still there. So that data is still there on chain on Bitcoin. Also, though, at the same time, I believe it was May of 2017, maybe 2018. I think 2017. GDPR just came out. This is the European data regulations around privacy. They really, really tightened up the rules around how web companies can use their users' data. And it was kind of scary and daunting at first. Right now we see that, well, the rules are there. There hasn't been as much enforcement. It's actually kind of too bad that way in a sense. But, around the time we were looking to wind down Ascribe, we were paying a lot in server fees. We were really worried about privacy and GDPR rules. And we saw that, that the transactions, the core of the transactions were online. So what we did was we put out a blog post that said, okay, artists, we're going to transition. I think that we gave 3 months or 6 months to transition. I forget the exact numbers. And after that time, we're going to wind down the Ascribe service. And so that's what we did. We executed on this over the span of those several months. And by the end of 2018, it was all wound down, and we did delete the database that had this user data for these reasons, primarily GDPR, privacy, as well as we were a startup and about costs, right? So that's how it was. Since that time, there have been some efforts for artists to revive the data. There's 2 aspects on this. So anyone who has their private keys to the Bitcoin addresses for their work, they still have, they can make a direct claim to that, right? If they had the data, as in the images, etc., then they kind of have the full work, right? Ideally, we would have never deleted the data, but it is what it is, right? Like I said, for the reasons we did. But if you want to recover it, you would have to recover the private key and the images, etc. And this is what we'd asked the artist to store. Myself, I actually stored this for about 10 or 20 works, so I've got it lying around. I haven't bothered trying to fully revive it yet. I've been busy with Ocean. And a few others have, started to do this, gone on this path a bit, but they haven't fully gone on this path. Interestingly, because the way that Ascribe terms of service work, we said, when you are registering this work, you are claiming copyright. When you're transferring the work, it is a license from the original copyright holder, a sub-license to be able to, buy, sell, publicly display, etc., to the others. And that still holds regardless of whether or not you have recovered the crypto side of things, right? So the people that bought the works, they still have the IP rights to those works that they bought. If they want, they can try to recover it crypto-wise. But if they don't have to, if they want, they could just simply go and register it again on Rarible or OpenSea or whatever, and say, hey, here's the work that I initially bought and inscribed, and then go that way, right? So either way works. The former is, more sort of cryptographically pure, but the second approach, where you just re-register and saying, hey, this is my new claim, that's okay too, right? Because of, it's leveraging IP law. It's a bit of a fudge in a sense, but that's what IP law allows for. So those are the sort of 2 conceptual ways to recover. Yeah, that's kind of how it's at. So, the rights have not been lost. The metadata and the image data that we had stored is no longer stored, but anyone else who stored that, then they have it. That's great. So yeah, that's kind of how it is.
Yeah, for us historical NFT nerds, the provenance of the token has always been very, very important. So they want to try to pursue that purity reclaim if possible, although we know now that it might not be possible, although there is a handful of ways to go about it. So then as we wind down the NFT conversation and then move into Ocean, as a final question was, as somebody who has seen the whole quote unquote NFT movement as being literally the de facto beginning, where it sits currently, is it where you thought the whole space was going? Is there any big surprises from 2013 to 2023, 10 years later, of the evolution of authenticating digital assets and selling digital art?
Yeah. So overall, the sort of what I had envisioned, and my co-founders too, Mash and Bruce, was, ultimately artists getting paid for their work, artists creating digital art. And we saw that blockchain, it made sense for blockchain to be the key part of that. That has happened. So we are overjoyed at that, right? We're really, really happy that artists can now get paid a lot more for the digital works than they could have 10 years ago. And even after we wound down Ascribe, we didn't know when this thing would take off. I remember and I was in a conversation as part of Metacartel Ventures, this sort of DAO VC that I've been a part of for years, about talking about, when will NFTs take off? And I remember I said something like, maybe it'll take off in 6 months, maybe it'll be another 5 years. I don't know. And I think that was in 2020. We just didn't know. And it turns out that it took off in 2021. Great, but it could have been another 5 years after that, right? And this is just how things are. So in the end, I'm very, very happy that artists have much better means to make money now as digital creators, and collectors have much better means to have a better security on what they have owned. It's cryptographically secured. It's your keys, your work. So yeah, it's in the broadest sense, it's sort of hit that. We didn't know the timeline, but in the more narrow sense, who know? We didn't know exactly how it would pan out, but over the years, Web3 kind of has taken shape, and how it's played out. Generally, it's pretty good. It's kind of too bad that the biggest marketplaces tend to be more centralized, like OpenSea. So I'm really happy with the marketplaces like Rarible that are much more pure on the decentralization. And I guess it's very similar to how we see with exchanges, right? There's more centralized exchanges, the Coinbases of the world, and the more decentralized ones, the Uniswaps and Balances of the world. So I guess it's the case with NFTs as well. On royalties, I think this is a key thing too. What is called royalties in NFTs land is actually has a more precise label in traditional art land. It's called artist resale rights, ARR, right? And this is actually law in France and Germany and other countries, where anytime a piece is sold, if you don't want to break the law, you actually have to give a percentage back to the artist. So I thought it was wonderful to see that NFT marketplaces were respecting this and following this to make it possible. They were calling it royalties. Like I said, that isn't quite the same thing. It's a type of royalty, but not just royalties. There's lots of other types of royalties that you can have in NFTs. And actually, it might kind of makes me a bit sad that some of these marketplaces, including OpenSea, have basically turned off royalties or made it, not the default. So I think that's, honestly, not a good sign for the industry, simply because, people who really care, it's really all about compensating the artists as well as, the collectors being able to securely own their collections. But on the compensating side, ARR is a key thing. And frankly, they're breaking the law in France and elsewhere. So if they want to respect the law, this is the way to do it. Of course, the crypto way is, well, there's protection via the law and there's protection via crypto. But for decentralized guys, well, you're kind of doing neither then, right? You're not really following the law and you're not really following the decentralization. So kudos to Rarible. The other guys, take note. Please follow the law. And please get our artists compensated, right? That's all, ARRs as well as the initial sale. So that's kind of how I see things overall. Like I said, I'm pretty happy with it. But there's still, tunings here and there that can and should be done ideally.
Yeah, it's well put. we don't know where it's going to go right now. They call it the NFT Marketplace war because it's a bear market, and you see market share. It's a battle for market share and consolidation. OpenSea's been kind of unseated, but that's more on the centralized aspect than the decentralized protocol, which you are now in. And as we were discussing before we started recording, you were saying that you believe the market that you have entered through Ocean Protocol is essentially going to be the next NFTs or even much larger. I'm gonna let you kind of explain it. I know that the Ocean Protocol can be quite complex of a decentralized data marketplace, but I know you'll be able to do a little better. Can you explain to us what Ocean Protocol is?
Sure. Maybe I'll start with the problem, right? So the problem is, well, at the heart of it, right? AI creates value from data, right? The best illustration of this is Facebook, right? Market cap anywhere between $400 billion and $1 trillion, depending on the month. And Google, et cetera. What do? They basically, have convinced people to dump a bunch of their data into Facebook itself. Who their friends are, their histories, all of that, and then with that, to use that data, take AI and then use it to basically place ads in front of you, right? To help sell stuff, basically, right? So that's the heart of the Facebook business model: is get a ton of data from users, and then make money via ads by data mining you. And that's what Facebook does. That's essentially what Google does too, with AdWords and all this, and others, right? So we're talking even just between Google and Facebook and a few more, we're talking trillions of dollars worth of market cap, right? With hundreds of $billion a year worth of revenue, probably $1 trillion if you sum it all up, right? That's sort of the size of the existing data economy, but it's a centralized, opaque data economy. Just like the money industry traditionally is centralized, crypto, et cetera, with the central banks, et cetera. And the idea of Bitcoin is to decentralize that, make it open, transparent, all of that, right? So that's kind of the one way to frame the problem. The sort of tear it down way, but the build it up way to frame the problem is, if you have data, how do you monetize it, right? Rather than sort of the Facebooks of the world having arbitrage on you, how do you monetize your data? And this is whether you're an individual with your personal data, maybe you'll make $50 or $500 a year, or whether you are a startup trying to create data of value in some way, how do you sell that? Whether you are an enterprise, maybe you have tons of data of miles driven for self-driving cars or otherwise, or a city or a nation or otherwise, right? So there's all these different questions. How do you monetize the data that you have, as well as just how do you share data more securely, right? Is there some way to just lock this down and have the data shared in a much more secure fashion, cryptographically verified, et cetera? And blockchain offers this possibility. And that's really what the heart of Ocean is about. So Ocean is a data exchange protocol to unlock data marketplaces, ones that are decentralized, permissionless, et cetera, as well as unlock data sharing, where you can have provenance on the sharing of the data. And the provenance of the sharing of the data really matters. You might have seen 2 or 3 weeks ago, for example, Stability.ai, the guys who did Stable Diffusion, one of these AI image generators, they got sued by Getty Images because they trained their AIs on Getty data, among other things. And Getty said, no, you can't do that. So imagine if Stability AI had provenance on which images they trained their data on and which ones they didn't. Ocean offers this possibility. So there's the idea of sharing of data, selling of data, as well as provenance around the data. These are a few of the key USPs, the sort of selling propositions of Ocean, if you will. So Ocean Protocol, at the heart, is a data exchange protocol for secure sharing of data, secure selling of data, and provenance. The applications include data marketplaces, but also sharing of data for training AI models, sharing of AI models themselves, securely, privately, sharing of AI model predictions, and more. Another way to view it is, think of it like DeFi Llama in a box. If you have, DeFi Llama, it's one of these projects in DeFi land that sells data, where they have to stand up their own servers, et cetera. They've done really well. I think what DeFi Llama has done really well, but it's all kind of centralized, sitting on top of decentralized stuff, right? Imagine if you could sell data feeds that do computation against other raw data and sell those data feeds as a data scientist without having to run all the server infrastructure, and everything was decentralized. This is the promise of Ocean, right? Ocean allows you to do this. And in terms of preserving privacy, one of the big tricks for Ocean there is bringing compute to the data. So let's say that I've got Trent's DNA data, and maybe there's a million other people who have their DNA data. Imagine if, I'll just stay with Trent's DNA data to start with. What if I want to share to someone whether or not one of my genes for, I don't know, susceptibility to Parkinson's is there or not, right? I could share this to someone else rather than sharing the data directly. It can be where those researchers are running some local compute against my data, where that data never leaves my control, it never leaves my premises, my server, whatever. And it can still do a compute to find out whether or not, in this particular case, I would be susceptible to Parkinson's, right, as an example. Or imagine if you have not just me, but a million other people worth of DNA data, and you can learn against this, this idea of federated learning. But, and, Google and others have been doing federated learning for, since about 2015, 2017. But the aggregation is all decentralized, is all centralized. What if that aggregation is decentralized? So truly decentralized federated learning, such that you can do, modeling and predictions against, many, many different data silos, but the data silos themselves get to stay, fully in the hands of the people controlling the data. And the final models stay and predictions are all decentralized as well. This is now possible with Ocean as well. So that's kind of the summary overall. Ocean is a decentralized data exchange protocol. And just as Ascribe was a decentralized digital art protocol, Ascribe was about leveling the playing field for digital artists, for them to, share their artworks, have secure provenance, and ultimately for them to make money. Ocean is very similar in that it levels the playing field for data and AI. Rather than artists, it's focusing on data scientists who, have data and who want to use this data, and it levels the playing field for them around the world of data and AI. So yeah, I'm quite excited about Ocean. I think it's a very large opportunity. The art market itself, pre-blockchain, pre-NFTs was about 60, 70 billion a year. With NFTs, it's growing. I forget the number, somewhere between, I think, 10 or 20 billion more, which is great. I see, with the data economy, the closed, opaque data economy is, depending how you measure, 500 billion a year, 1 trillion a year or more. So it's a very huge opportunity that way. And so far, it's been centralized. So Ocean aims to, decentralize this, to level the playing field. And that's why I see it as a huge opportunity, as well as, it touches on, one of my other loves too, which is AI. I've always, been a huge fan of AI, worked in it for a long time. Just like art has been a long time love, same thing for AI. So, and they have, they draw on similar ideas, right? Digital art marketplace, data marketplace, drawing art as IP, leveraging the tools of IP to help protect another layer of protection for the artist. Same thing for data, IP, intellectual property, as another layer of protection to help protect the data owner, et cetera.
So as I have the screen pulled up, there's two sides to this, and then Ocean is essentially the decentralized broker of data. You have the data publishers and the data consumers. Looking at it today, where Ocean stands today, who are the publishers and who are the consumers? Is it institutional grade, we'll say data consumers, whoever the decentralized Facebook is, and then who is publishing it? Like what's the current users, and I guess you could say, what type of data is most commonly being published on Ocean today?
Yeah, so these days there's a wide variety. Ocean traction maturity is sort of where Ascribe was in, say, 2015, right? So where there was a lot of, promising applications being developed on top, and you don't know which one will pop, right? So in Ascribe case, there was, art marketplaces, but like I mentioned, also art TV channels and other sort of means of distribution. So in Ocean, there's, 20 plus startups building on top of Ocean, everything from decentralized data science competitions to decentralized sharing of machine learning models, sort of like GitHub for machine learning, to data DAOs. This is a big thing. Ocean supports the idea of DAOs, where the DAO can hold data as ERC20 or ERC 721. So data DAOs, where then you have collective bargaining around buying and selling of data. You have, our data marketplaces as well, whether it's, startups going for a particular niche, or whether it's enterprises having their own data marketplace. Daimler, for example, has a data marketplace called Eccentric that is serving the automotive market, and that's built on ocean technology, and many more, right? So there's a bunch of different projects building on top of Ocean, going for pursuing various hypotheses of where they could get traction, right? In terms of the types of data, we've got stuff where it's DeFi data and trading data, such as what are the promising coins for the week or for the month, NFT data, decentralized metaverse NFT data, such stuff from Decentraland, all that, but then also other stuff, right? Climate data and automotive data, etc. The traction, and there's not like massive crazy traction in any one of these things. So I wouldn't try to read too much into the patterns that are emerging just yet. Although, what I see is that in the next, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, the traction that will probably grow the most is where there's the lowest latency to value creation. And this is within the world of DeFi likely, as well as this emerging world of AI, with the large language models, et cetera. So those are the things that are moving at hyperspeed, where you can create a lot of value by applying AI against your data quite quickly. So I think those will move the fastest, but there's, stuff that's slower moving that is, super promising for the medium and long term, whether it's for automotive or for medical. To me, like medical data research, it just makes sense to have it, to leverage Ocean for sharing. Imagine if you can build a model to predict cancer across 1 billion people, right? Right now, doing that centralized, it would be a privacy nightmare. But Ocean unlocks this to make it, really great possibilities for the future. So that's kind of where I see things now with Ocean. Lots of hypotheses being pursued, a very, very healthy ecosystem of startups, et cetera. And we'll see which will pop.
Yeah, and then as we close this out, and as you were talking, I was thinking about all the different possibilities. On one hand, you try to think of the best ending possible, where this is, hospitals are publishing data, it's being consumed by individuals who then can produce some sort of cure for whatever disease exists. On one hand, being in crypto for so long, I think, the almost dystopic view is that the degens just use the data so that they can go speculate on a more precise, with more precision. Is the ultimate end of this through your AI mind that the producers and the consumers of the data are both just AIs interacting with each other from businesses who are producing the data, and then another business is then consuming it through their AI models? Is that kind of where all this is going?
I expect that, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 99% of the data bought and sold will be via automated bots, AIs, et cetera, right? But actually, this is already right now for Web 2 and data. This is probably the case, right? Because the largest volumes are on ad exchanges, right? We're talking 500,000 plus transactions per second for ad exchanges. So I anticipate similar type setups in the world of data, whether it's for hopefully not ads or maybe ads, but for speculation and trading and so on. And I'm actually not anti-speculation and trading. I see that as a part of establishing the market for data, right? We do have the traditional world of finance where there's speculation, and speculation is a prerequisite for a market to form, and we do want markets to form around data. So there's speculation on data itself. We call it DataFi, but there's also using data to speculate on prices of cryptocurrencies, as well as traditional finance, all of that. So I think traditional finance will move to using Ocean at some point. It will make sense, as well as DeFi to be using Ocean, and that will just help to those are two verticals that have very legitimate use cases. But of course, I see if it stops there, I would be sad. And Ocean is designed to serve these other more positive, like not more positive. More sort of directly positive, beneficial use cases for society, right? So for health, it's a big one. I see climate as another big one, right? Right now the data around climate is sort of scattered in many, many different places, right? Imagine if that data, and especially the collecting together of that data for value add, is pulled together in one decentralized place. So it's logically one place, but infrastructure wise, it's decentralized. And Ocean is, a promising place to put that. So these are for things like predicting what will the sea level be in 1 year or in 5 years, et cetera, right? At any given point in the world. And then that leading to things like, what will the real estate price be, right? 30 years, the predictions are that Miami is going to be underwater fully. It's already having floods, right? But, that's actually what ties it to financial, which is very valuable, because once you have tied to financial, then it starts to, really incentivize behavior in the nearer term potentially too. So overall, I see that Ocean can serve many, many verticals, whether it's traditional or decentralized finance, but also climate and health and automotive and all these other verticals. And the protocol is built to be general enough for all of these, but traction will pop first in some of these, and then it will pop in other ones, right? So yeah, that's kind of how I see it playing out.
Wow. I have to say, you are one intelligent person. I have full faith of putting the future in your hands, my friend. Again, I know you're a busy guy, and I appreciate you for coming on and sharing the history of NFTs, and then kind of where data, AI, and blockchain is heading. I'm a big firm believer now in Ocean and data aggregation, man. I need to spin up my own marketplace now at this point and start putting out some more historical NFT thesis and all of the other ideas. My brain is absolutely spinning. But Trent, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate you for sharing your time with us.
Thank you very much for having me. And yeah, thanks for the great questions.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for listening and watching. We'll catch you next time.